Thanks so much, Christine. Welcome, everybody, and welcome, Lessa. It's wonderful to have this opportunity to talk with you and uh, maybe pose some hard questions to you. We'll see how it goes. Well, Lessa, I want to try something. I want to see if I can pronounce your entire name. All right. So, everybody, I'd like to welcome Lessa Kanani'opua Pelayo-Lozada to this My Leadership Journey conversation. So Lessa, how did I do?
You did perfect.
Great.
Perfect. You've been practicing.
Right. Hey, Lessa, is Lessa short for something like Melissa or something, or that's your first name?
That is my full first name, and I am actually named after the main character in a book called The Dragon Riders of Pern by Anne McCaffrey. She is a werewoman who was the last of her line and saved the dragon riders. So that's me.
Wow, that's great. So is that because your parents told you about that book or some librarian?
It was my parents. They are huge sci-fi fantasy nerds.
Great. Well, everybody, let me just give you a little brief bio of Lessa. We're certainly pleased to have you here, and maybe people know everything I'm about to say about you because you are a popular person. But for those of you who don't know or just want to be reminded, Lessa is the president-elect of the American Library Association. Her term begins this June at the ALA conference in DC, so everybody will be there rooting you on. Lessa, by the way, is the first Pacific Islander and youngest person to be elected president of the American Library Association. Woohoo! So according to Wikipedia, get this person has a Wikipedia page, right? In 2006, you worked as a library aide at the Los Angeles Public Library. That was news to me. And as a youth librarian at Redondo Beach Public Library, the Glendale Public Library, and the city of Rancho Cucamonga. In 2018, Lessa became the Adult Services Assistant Manager for the Palos Verdes Library District in Southern California. You're a SoCal girl. Lessa grew up in Southern California. She has a bachelor's degree in sociology and a master's of library and information science, both from UCLA. Go Bruins. So Lessa's professional service is incredible. Includes serving as chair of the advisory committee for ALA's Office of Diversity, Literacy, and Outreach Services, and several terms on ALA Council. Bless you. She's also served as the president of the Asian Pacific American Librarians Association. So Lessa, we want to hear all about your leadership journey and how someone with so few years has gotten to this position of president-elect of the American Library Association. So you're going to tell us all about it, right?
Of course.
All right, everybody get your pencils ready so you're able to take some notes. So Lessa, this is about leadership, and we want you to talk with us about your leadership journey. Llama has created a list of 14 foundational leadership competencies. And I'm just wondering, how do you define leadership?
Sure. So the definition of leadership that kind of stuck with me and was when I kind of knew that I was actually a leader, I guess it's still kind of up for debate depending on the day, but was when someone said that you show up, right? And so I think that a lot of leadership is showing up and doing the hard work, whether it's setting vision or strategy or listening to get consensus. For me, a lot of leadership, I think, is building up others. It's not being the loudest voice in the room or the first one to talk or talking the most. It's just really making sure that you're supporting and community building.
But you've got to make a decision about what things you want to show up for, right? So, I mean, what are those things? What are you passionate about that says, I'm going to show up for this, but not for that?
For me, it usually centers around, like I said, building community, but building community in specifically the Asian Pacific American community. I'm really, anything that has to do with equity, diversity, and inclusion is hard for me to say no to. Right now, it's, ALA governance specifically, which is a super exciting topic for many people. But it's something that I've come to be really passionate about through my work. And so anytime that I see where I can make an impact to support others and lift others up, that's what I'm passionate about, is helping to grow other individuals.
Oh, that's great. So we'll get to the ALA story in a few minutes, but you also, before we got on camera here, we were talking a little bit about your experience in Eureka, which was a leadership program started here in California. You also said something to me about what that program meant to you. Would you share it with us?
Yeah, so that program was, I think, pretty transformational in my leadership journey. I felt very brave asking the Glendale Public Library if I could even go to it. And so because, they afforded me that opportunity within, I think it was like my first year of working at Glendale, they saw the potential in me that I was nervous about and I was curious about, but I hadn't quite developed yet. And so when I was accepted, I went into that experience saying, I'm going to be brave. I'm going to be bold, and I'm going to ask for things. I'm going to introduce myself to new people. I'm not going to wait for them to come to me. And having that mindset going in empowered me to be able to make connections, like with the wonderful Patty Wong, with my cohort and my colleagues some of them have become my literal best friend in the world, and so that I think also gave me the support network to be able to do the work and to be able to go forward, because I knew that I had cheerleaders and advocates who believed in me, and I just kind of had to learn to believe in myself a little bit more.
Well, you don't strike me as a shy person. So when you were at Eureka, I'm imagining that you probably were not only there present, but you're also very engaged in the whole program. How many people were in the program with you?
I want to say that my class was like 32, 35 individuals from all across the state of California.
Okay. So now we've kind of morphed from Eureka into the developing leaders in California's libraries, for California's libraries. And we have a cohort this year of about 40. I think we lost one or two, which is kind of a natural thing. People, things happen in people's lives, especially these days with COVID and all. But leadership programs like that, I think have played a significant role, it sounds like, in your life, in others. I've had the opportunity to participate. You mentioned Patty, and Patty's been a mentor for a lot of folks in programs like this. How valuable is this kind of special program? I mean, sometimes people think of it as like, well, that's just for, some other people. But, how valuable has it been, and how valuable is it to our community? I mean, ALA even has a leadership program. What are your thoughts about that?
I think, you bring up that they can be very exclusive and feel very cliquish, right? Like, oh, I went through Eureka, I went through the Emerging Leaders program. And I can definitely see how those kinds of things can appear when you're not going through an inclusive process or a transparent process to figure out, who gets to have a seat in that leadership program, who gets to have a seat at that table. And also it depends on what you come back with when you're part of those programs, right? If you come back and you're like, well, no, I'm not going to do that because I did Eureka, or I am now capable of doing this because I did that. And you put on an air kind of superiority. I think that's where those types of things start to become devalued and start to get kind of that bad rap, because I think that they're essential. And I think that everybody who wants to have that opportunity should have that opportunity. They're expensive and they're difficult to develop, but when you can open it up, it just benefits everybody, to be quite honest. One of the things that I was really lucky to be a part of this year was the Asian Pacific American Librarians Association and the Chinese American Librarians Association came together to do an IMLS grant called Pathway to Leadership, looking at Asian Pacific Islander leadership, what the challenges and barriers are, how we can move forward. And so just seeing where all of those opportunities lie and being able to create that space for folks, because it was virtual, the benefit was that originally we had only anticipated accepting like 50 folks, but instead we got to invite 100 in.
Wow.
And so to continue building that network, I think is essential to those types of leadership programs.
So let me drill down a little bit on that, because one of the things that I guess I'm not struggled with, but it's always been something in the back of my mind. And it has to do with, we have these wonderful caucuses, whether it's Apala, Reforma, the Black Caucus, Kala, there are at least a half a dozen American Indian. And, For me in my career, it was a very, very helpful kind of channel for me to feel comfortable with my community and also to develop my leadership skills and develop my own network as well. The flip side of that is that a lot of the national work, I'm going back in the day, maybe a couple of decades ago, where, it was hard then to kind of influence the ALA, to be blunt, because we were off in little groups. And I've seen a big change in the last 5-7 years. JCLC, for example, has done a great job of kind of bringing community together. Look at our elections, with officers and counselors for ALA. I guess what I'm wondering about is, do you have that same kind of experience where, the work that you do, you used to be president of APALA, you were also the executive director of APALA. How do you kind of marry those two kind of, I don't know if they're competing, but there are certainly different points of view on how you approach professional work and major issues?
Yeah, so one of the things, that we've really developed over APALA, in the course of the 10 or so, over 10 years that I've been involved, has been to cultivate that relationship between our large, ALA, SAA, those really large national associations and us, and what that looks like to us is mentoring, right? Taking folks with us when we're at conference, having meetups and events at ALA so that we can, grab somebody's hand and take them with us to introduce them to, a past ALA president, or take them to a committee meeting with us, and say, I think you'd be really interested in this, or encourage them to run for council. We've been really intentional in making sure that we are bringing folks along with us and preparing them, right? Because how we run meetings in APALA is a little bit different than how we run meetings in ALA. There's cultural differences. The audience is different. We have a different level of formality that is required of us. We do still technically follow rules of order, but we're always like, wait, okay, what was that again? We'll get the cheat sheet. So I think that a lot of the preparation that we've done on that National Association of Librarians of Color level has expanded into ALA. And it's not just APALA, right? I think that all of the NALCOs have done that work, and it's really showing now the fruits of the labor over the last, I think BCLA celebrated their 50th anniversary, and APALA celebrated 40 years just last year. So you see how we've grown since then, and how we've changed, and how our focuses have changed as well.
Yes, that's wonderful. That's a great answer. Thank you. So a little bit more on your background. You called yourself as somebody, and I'm quoting you, so I don't want people to think that I'm just not being rude here, or being rude. You said your heritage is half white and half Hawaiian, Portuguese, Filipino, and a smidge of Chinese. So how has that heritage kind of influenced you and your leadership style?
Yeah, so primarily, I identify as mixed race, and really with my Hawaiian side, right? Because my grandparents came from Hawaii, were Native Hawaiian Kanaka Maoli. And so that's really important to us to make sure that we're perpetuating our culture forward.
Mm-hmm.
But I also come from two very strong genealogists. My mom is actually in Salt Lake City right now, looking up some records with the new census that was just released. And my grandfather was also very strong. So that's why I also am always very mindful to honor, all the parts that have made me a whole, and I can get into percentages and things like that, but that's also, some colonizer talk. So I try not to do that, but being mixed race and having that lens of Hawaiian values and culture, I think is really intrinsic to my leadership style. As a servant leader, I always want to be of service to the community and do things for others. In Hawaiian, there's two values, kuleana and kokua, which is responsibility. Kuleana is the responsibility that we have, the responsibility to each other, the responsibility to the land, and kokua, which is just supporting, right? How can I kokua you? How can I help? I am here to help. And so having that as my foundation, I think has been really important to how I approach libraries specifically, because we're all about community building and a responsibility to one another. But also being mixed race and knowing all these different parts of me and having the privilege of being able to know where my ancestors come from, I think is important to me as a leader, to be able to see many sides of an issue, right? My mom was a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution, right? My grandparents founded one of the first Hawaiian civic clubs on the continent. And so while there's tension there, and so having to live with that tension also, like on a DNA level, I think allows me to be able to listen and to be able to see those different points of view and try to figure out how we can come to consensus,
Right.
And how we can do what's best for everyone.
It's interesting because, when I was doing research on your background, I was really moved by your, one of the essays you wrote had to do with your desire to learn more about your Hawaiian heritage. It sounded like when you were younger, maybe in your teens and all, you were kind of still sorting that out. I mean, that's kind of a natural thing, but for you to kind of bear that in your essay, to talk about, the search that you had, the quest for understanding your identity. And you talked about going to Hawaii and going to a big family event, and you came back. Now, that really moved me. I thought that was, very strong and courageous of you to talk about that. Is your journey complete?
I don't think it's ever complete, right? Because our identity changes in the circles that we move in, and how we view ourselves changes in the circles that we move in. And there's still so much about, my Hawaiian culture that I don't know, about my ancestors that I don't know, like my Filipino side, like when my great grandfather came to Hawaii and met that security card bouncer, Hawaiian, Tita, like kind of a hardcore lady. There's so much to always learn. And as I learn more, it changes who I am also, because I want to do things for them and to make them proud, and it was interesting, like you brought up that piece, because I haven't thought about that piece in a really long time, actually. And I reread it last night in preparation for it, and I was like, I was really vulnerable there. And that changes too, right? Like the vulnerability that we can bring in the different positions that we are. And so, but what I think, like reflecting upon that piece in the role that I'm in now has been interesting also, because when I was campaigning for ALA president last year, I was always a little bit nervous, to say like the first Pacific Islander president, and things like that, because it comes along with a lot of certain connotations, and people expecting very specific things. But I've been embraced by so many folks and have been able to be exposed to a lot more because of the different situations and leadership circles I've been in. So no, it's not over, but it continues on.
Thank you. So what are you most proud of the work that you've done in libraries so far?
So there's a couple of things that I'm super proud of. But I think the thing that I'm proudest of in this moment, and that is at the top of my mind because I had a meeting on it this morning, is Palos Verdes Library District's racial equity work that we've done. And we've been able to do that. The work has been coming for a long time, kind of setting the seeds for it and beginning the conversations, but it was really propelled forward thanks to the Cultivating Racial Equity and Inclusion in Libraries grant that was led by Patty Wong and Chantel Walker. And so our library was able to be a cohort in that. And out of that cohort, we created our build team, bridging understanding, information, learning, and development. But we've been able to do staff trainings and have like really difficult conversations within our library and bring awareness to the work, and to also institutionalize it a little bit. And so what I'm proud of most with that is, getting it started, but being able to pass on the baton, right? Because as I get closer to June, I am letting go of more things to get ready for that. And so to watch folks, take on that mantle and that responsibility, because you always get kind of afraid, like, is it me? Am I the one who's doing all of this? But no, we are doing this together, and we've built a community. So that I'm really proud of. And another thing that's related that I'm really proud of is when I was a young readers librarian here about 5 or 6 years ago now, I was inspired by the American Indian children's blog by Debbie Reese, and I went through our folk tales and fairy tale collection to see what was being cataloged as folk tales and fairy tales, but should actually be in the religion section. And so we had a really big project where we were able to kind of decolonize Dewey a little bit and get that work done. And it continues on today. Every once in a while, even though I'm in adult services now, they're like, what do you think of this book? And I'm like, that one's a religion book for sure. Sometimes it takes a little bit of research, but I've been proud to do that work and to extend it into adult services too.
Well, that's wonderful. You know, I thought for sure you're going to say, you know, what you're proudest of is being elected ALA president, but it's wonderful that you kind of brought it back home and, you know, what that meant to you and what it means to you in your current position. And, you know, I have to think though, being president-elect, and Patty, you're on the phone, so you're there, you know what it's like. Becoming a president of ALA, this large association of nearly 60,000 members across the nation, well revered in the library community, internationally, et cetera, et cetera. It's an awesome responsibility, right? It's an awesome responsibility. I mean, I was looking back over the past couple of decades of the BIPOC presidents that we've elected, you know, and you know, going back, gosh, I looked at Carla Hayden, our Librarian of Congress, was in 2003. Laureen Roy, American Indian Libraries, Camila Alire, Courtney Young, you know, and you know, here we are, Patty Wong, and now here you are coming in out of the chute, so to speak. You know, which shoulder do you carry that on? I mean, is it a burden or is it an honor? I mean, somewhere in the middle, huh?
You know, it is one of the greatest honors, I think, of my career, of my life, to be able to hold this position and to be able to follow in the footsteps of such strong leaders. You know, I became an ALA member in 2007. So my experience as an ALA member has been these really strong presidents that you named, you know, and when I was deciding to go into libraries, you know, that was on the heels of Carla Hayden and the Patriot Act and all of those kinds of things. And so, you know, it is not, I think, with any, I go in trying to have fun with it, but I also go in recognizing that there's a lot of work to be done. And a lot of things that I am responsible for to our membership. You know, our membership elected me for a lot of reasons, and it is up to me to uphold that promise that I made during the campaign and that I continue to make over and over. And just, you were like, oh, I thought, you know, your answer would be being ALA president, but I will say I make a distinction, right, of what I do in libraries and what I do in the association. You know, like in my head. So you say libraries, I'm like, okay, this is what I do in my daily job. Association, this is what I do, you know, in APALA and ALA. And while the twain may meet, and the twain do meet, you know, I do try to make that distinction because I have to be a little bit, divide my brain, I would say.
Well, also to mention, not to mention, you know, you one job you get paid for, so you got to, you know, do.
That is also the key there, Marty.
So if you want to do a commercial break and give a shout out to your boss and your employer, that's fine too.
No, absolutely. And, you know, I will say also in my notes, I had, when we get to talking about becoming ALA president, you know, I always have to thank PVLD and my director and the directors that have come before, you know, that have supported me on this journey, that let me go to conference twice a year, and who also recognize the value in ALA and the value in sending staff to these things and the leadership skills that we bring back and the experiences that we bring back. I think that cannot be you know, thanked enough for the institution that I work for, but also for all those library directors out there who afford their employees that opportunity to let an adult services assistant manager be ALA president.
PVLD is the Palos Verdes Library District, for those who may not know that. So what are you planning to do during your presidency? I read a couple quotes, but I want to hear it from you now. What do you hope to accomplish in this year of whatever you want to call it, this year of glory?
This year of glory. Well, I've got a lot of ideas. I've got some big plans. And so I want to focus around three primary areas: library workers and labor rights, because that's huge, right? Coming out of COVID, if we can say that we're coming out of it, learning to live with it, I guess, might be a better way to put it, and the struggles and the trauma that we have coming out of that. I want to really focus on our members in that arena. I also really want to focus on partnerships and leveraging our non-library related partnerships and what that looks like. So I'm hoping to host a series of conversations over the next year with related organizations who do, parallel work to us, but where we can begin to see the intersections and look at what developing a partnership looks like from the grassroots, rather than saying, hey, I have this project and I would love for you to sign on. And then also, of course, EDI, but specifically EDI in the lens of intersectionality, right? As it stands with our economic classes, how we come to the profession, how we show up for our communities, how we work with our gay and our queer colleagues and our communities and our neurodivergent folks, and really looking at how we can bring that all home. And that kind of all rests a lot in looking at ALA's Allied Professional Association, yes, which is ALA's 501c6. ALA is a 501c3, a charity organization. So this is our professional organization. And looking at the potential that we have in there to advocate for library workers, for pay equity, for status, and ways that we can support folks who don't have those opportunities within their institutions or just need extra support. So we're looking at a lot of exciting programs, workshops, hopefully some scholarships also to support those who have, been historically disenfranchised from the association, but also who have suffered really difficult times during the pandemic. And I also want to give a shout out to my advisory committee. Sorry, 18 amazing folks, and some of them are on this call right now. So I would be remiss because I could not do this work without them.
Hey, well, that's great. I'm already exhausted, and your term hasn't even started yet, but that's great. Hey, so, there's the things you mentioned, there's also a different side, another side to being president, I think. You might dispute this, and it has to do with kind of representing our profession to the external community. And, I'm not sure, Patty, how much you were able to travel. I know that Julius, he was, and Wanda before Julius, the former presidents, they got caught in this COVID bubble, and they really couldn't, be as visible to outside world as much as, they would have perhaps liked to have been. It sounds like you may be doing more of that, or it depends on COVID, or we talked about that.
Yeah, so I have a very full fall that I was looking at this morning. That's giving me a little bit of anxiety. I will admit, it's a lot of travel when I haven't done a whole lot of travel. But a lot of it is speaking to our broader library community and visiting state association conferences. So I'm really excited to be going to the Arkansas Library Association, Alabama, Hawaii. I'll also be going to the Sharjah Book Fair. So I'm going to get to do some international travel. The International Federation of Library Associations, IFLA, will be in Dublin this year. Yes. So there's a lot of opportunity to really spread the good news and to spread all of the creative, forced, innovative things that we have done over the last 2 years. So I'm really excited to do that and see folks that we haven't seen in forever.
So it's not going to be fun. I mean, you're going to get some microphones stuck in your face, and they're going to be wanting to know, what about those books that are on those library shelves that, kids shouldn't be reading? Are you all prepped for that?
Yeah, we're really lucky to have such a strong Office for Intellectual Freedom in ALA, who has been doing the really difficult work over the last year with the over 700, almost 800 challenges last year alone, where they provided a lot of one-on-one mentoring. And so, I have experience with it, and with book challenges on, a professional level. I've been on my share of committees, to review materials for patrons. But they prepare us, it's not a single person that makes an ALA president. It is a community that makes an ALA president. And so having those folks to do that work is important, to be able to, when I get those questions about challenges, and when we do those newspaper interviews and NPR interviews and things like that, to get that word out there. And, we're going to unite against book bans. So that's what we're doing.
So I would want to encourage folks to submit any questions if they'd like to into the chat box or Q&A, and we'd love to hear from you as well. this is a good time to pose any questions to Lessa. And so, you hit on this a little bit earlier, having to do with kind of mentoring and mentorship, and who have you turned to for mentorship, whether it's been formal or informal, and what's your view on you doing the same, kind of returning the favor?
Yeah, I have so many mentors, I have to say. I think that, and formal, informal, Eloisa Bora from the UCLA Business School, she was essential in getting me and other Filipino librarians through library school. She would host, a pizza at lunch for us once a quarter just to check in and make sure we're okay. I was really lucky also that my first boss in libraries was a Japanese American woman named Linda Shamani at the Lomita Library. And so she always pushed me, and introduced me to regional administrators and was like, she's the next big thing. And then I have kind of my Apollo folks, that I've come up with over the last 10 years, Sandy Wee, Leanna Giuliano, Patty Wong, of course, Alana Aiko Moore, Wendy Prelitz. Some of it is peer mentoring, some of it is, sharing advice, but I think that it's so essential. I mentioned earlier, like grabbing somebody's hand, and taking them into reception. That's what my mentors have done for me, literally and figuratively, like pushed me into doors. Because I am a bit of a shy person and very much an introvert, I will say, so I gotta like gear myself up for things like that. and that doesn't always cut it when you've got your mentors and they know what you're capable of. You do it because they said so, and it's always with love. I try to take sometimes a little more of a gentle approach with those I'm mentoring. Would you like to do this with me? Sometimes it does call for the hardness, but I've been really lucky also to participate in the formal Apollo mentoring program. So I've had 2 mentees through that, and the really structured way to mentor is also really nice. What do you want to accomplish? How can we do that together? But I find that it always turns into a peer mentoring. We're both learning from each other, and I think that that's really important too.
Yes, that's wonderful. So do we have any questions here?
No, I haven't seen any.
Okay. Well, I'll do more questions. So what do you see as what's next in your leadership journey?
Getting through this year. It is really hard because I've been so focused on, ALA presidency, making sure that I do a good job, that what comes after is a little bit of a mystery. And it is one of the things that I want to figure out over this next year, because I think that this experience is going to open me up to a lot of new opportunities. And I always want to be open to seeing where it takes me. And, this interest that I'm coming out of COVID with in library workers' rights and advocacy, I think is going to be where my leadership takes me next. I've been toying with the idea of maybe becoming a union steward at work, or, a lot more once I'm off, ALA board and things like that, doing more on committees and things that focus on salary and status of library workers. So that's where I'm really looking towards the next stage of this journey.
So there were a couple of people I've spoken with, and, I've asked them this, I'll ask you as well, and having to do, kind of a leadership journey outside of librarianship. And, I forget right now who I was actually speaking with about this, but, looking at community work, whether running for school board or getting involved with, local politics or local nonprofits or organizations. Is that something that you've also considered?
Yeah, I mean, on a professional level, but also just on a personal level. I have always been part of, a Hawaiian community organization, whether it was a hula halau, so we were dancing, or now I'm part of the Hawaii's Daughters Guild of Southern California. So, we raise funds and do cultural things, but to give scholarships back to the community. And I think that's one of the things that I didn't know about libraries when I went into it, actually. I thought I was just going to be a librarian, right? Like I was going to be a children's librarian, branch manager, maybe I would teach an LIS, but there's so many other opportunities that our skills are so transferable for that there's a lot to explore there.
Yes. We have a couple questions. So I'm going to read it in case people can't see it. But this person says, how do you determine when it's time to move on? I've noticed that you've gotten experience at a number of library systems.
Yeah, so part of that is because I graduated library school during the recession. So there were not a lot of full-time jobs available. So for about almost 3 years after graduation, I was piecemealing, and working part-time at a lot of different places. But within, my full-time career, I've worked at, 3 different libraries now. And for me, it's usually time to go when we've maybe kind of outgrown each other a little bit. Promotion within library systems can be really difficult, especially in smaller systems. And I think that, I've always had good managers that recognized that also, when maybe I needed different experiences, still loved doing the work that I was doing, but just needed different opportunities. So that's been the primary driver for me.
So you get pushed out of the nest sometimes.
You do get pushed out.
So what gets you up in the morning, says Patty Wong. And if you couldn't be a librarian, what else would you be?
Ooh, so I'm going to go with the second question first. I've always, kind of my pipe dream is I've always wanted to be a photographer. Or a consultant. Like I always joke, I want to go freelance someday. What that looks like, I don't know. It could be as a photographer, it could be some kind of library consultant, something completely different. But I just love looking for different angles of things. So that's one thing that I would do if I wasn't working in libraries. And I think what gets me up in the morning are the folks that I work with every day and who check in on me every day and ask if I'm all right. Am I upright? The folks who are like, you need to be awake here,
right,
and who give me grace. So,
see,
so
they're assuming you go to bed. They're assuming you get some sleep.
Exactly.
So here's another question. How do you manage your time, and how do you enforce boundaries and keep from burning out with all that you're doing?
That. So I have been told I'm a very organized person. I love myself a good planner and a good calendar. And I like to, when I'm feeling overwhelmed, actually, and I'm not quite sure what I should do next, I go to my calendars and I see what's coming up because it kind of comforts me to be able to anticipate. I also keep a lot of to-do lists. And on those calendars, I block out time to be able to say, I'm going to work on this project right now. I'm going to answer email right now. And so that's been really important for me. And enforcing boundaries is a journey. I will say that. I also would not necessarily say that I'm not currently burnt out. Who can know? We're all just surviving, right? As I'm sure many of you are. But I think that it's really important to recognize when you need rest. And when you need to do something different. I was just at the ALA executive board meetings over the weekend. And so when I was on my way to the airport with a couple of colleagues, they were like, oh, what are you doing tomorrow? And I was like, well, I just did a week at PLA. I just did a weekend here in Chicago. Tomorrow, I am not thinking about libraries, actually. It wasn't true. I did think about libraries because I can't help myself. But it's important to find those things that fill you and make sure that you are incorporating those into your calendar and your schedule whenever you can.
Okay. So somebody wants to know, what's your kryptonite or your superpower?
Oh, gosh. I think one of my kryptonites is folks who are doing good work asking me to help them with something, because I always want to help and I have such a hard time saying no, which relates back to the boundaries talk there.
Right.
And so that's one of my kryptonites. And I would say that my superpower, I think, is kind of reading a room. I think, and being able to help not direct a conversation, but to figure out where a conversation might be going and what intersections a group might need to be able to talk to one another, because it's not always easy depending on the topic, or just take a break. Maybe we just need to all take a deep breath.
It reminds me of something I thought about a little while ago when you were talking, and it has to do with, when you get labeled as a leader, someone looks at you and, oh, Lessa as a leader. At a certain point, there's leading and then there's pushing, right? You may have an agenda and you want to see it happen, but you got to work it so that it achieves what you hope will happen, right? So how do you balance that? How do you know when it's, oh, I'm pushing too hard? Maybe you read the people, you read the room, but there's also, at a certain point, it may be so important to you, you don't want to give it up. So how do you balance those two things?
I think that it's important when I feel kind of frustrated because maybe things aren't moving in the direction that I had intended, it's important for me to check what my motivation behind that feeling is. Is this because I want it, or is this because what we need? We weren't necessarily going to talk about the steering committee on organizational effectiveness, SCOE, which for those who are not familiar with SCOE was a committee that looked at how we could change or transform ALA governance to gain more engagement. A lot of ideas came out of that group. I didn't even necessarily agree with 100% of all the ideas that we put into the recommendations, but it was part of the journey to push those forward and to have the conversations with folks. Is this the right path for us forward? Are we ready for these changes also? Maybe it is the right path, but maybe we're just not there yet. And it's gonna come not in the 2 years we were hoping, but in 5, 6, 7, 10 years. And to be able to figure out what that path looks like, I think is really important. So for me, when I would get, kind of a little extra like, well, why don't they just see it the way that I do? Right. And it was like, well, because they're coming with different lenses. And so to be able to look through their lens and figure out maybe what they are afraid of also, sometimes when we come into those leadership challenges, it's rooted in fear of other folks. So identifying those fears as well, I think is important with change management and knowing that you don't always have the right answer.
Lessa, sometimes being a leader means you've got to make that hard decision and say, I'm sorry, we've heard you all. I'm not sure how long SCOE's been going on, but at least 7, 8 years, right?
It's been a lifetime.
Yes. You could live and die through okay. Now you need to push, okay? Are you ever in situations where you say, I've heard you all, I'm sorry, but this is where we're going?
Yeah, I have been in those situations. By the time that I have gotten there, I've been pretty lucky that I also have of folks who also support the decision to be able to help, because maybe I'm just not able to articulate it correctly, or I'm not able to communicate it in a way that can get buy-in, or sometimes you just can't get buy-in for some things. That was one of the conversations that we had in cultivating racial equity and inclusion in libraries was, we're not going to get everyone to come along with us. That's the dream, that's the ideal, but we have to say we are committed to racial equity. We are committed to doing this for our staff and upholding ourselves to these standards. And you can come along or you can figure something else out, and we are happy to help you figure out what that alternative might look like.
I'll tell you something, I have admired you from afar, and in particular, when I would see you giving those reports to council about SCOE, and I was thinking, this person should be made a saint or something, because what you are doing is a tough job. So thank you for standing up for the committee's work and for taking the hits when somebody needed to receive them. There's another question here about what helped you prepare the most for your move into supervisory roles? At some point you were a frontline librarian, and the next thing you know, you're a supervisor.
So I think the leadership programs that I went into, they really helped to develop me, because we had the conversation on leadership versus management.
Yes.
And so being able to go into those roles, knowing what that bifurcation meant and how I could be a leader as a children's librarian, but when I stepped into the role of manager, it was a little bit different. That was really important to me. I also read a lot. I really enjoy leadership and management books, some light reading. That was really important to me as well as having mentors, right? And I will say UCLA did also have a management class. And I know not necessarily all library school programs do. So I was thankful to be able to have that. And I saw Michelle pop into the chat, what is the difference between leadership and management? And so I see leadership as, more providing vision and getting buy-in and having difficult conversations with, which can be management, but management is also about getting things done. Like, we have a project that we need to manage. Here is the timeline. I have, a colleague or a staff member who's struggling. What resources do we need? So it's a lot of, I think management is a lot of, I want to use the word managing, but is a lot of handling those types of projects and very specific things, whereas leadership is a lot larger. But I don't know, what do you think, Martin?
No, I think you're right. I think with the management is all about organization, and leadership is about inspiration. To me, it's kind of, and sometimes you can be an inspiring manager, and other times you can be an organized leader, right? You kind of have both pieces that you have to work with at the same time. And it's knowing when to push and when to pull, and when to hold somebody by the hand, and when to whatever the opposite of that would be. So, you're going to be ahead of the association, not just the public libraries, not just the academic libraries, not the special, of all of us, okay? All of us. Thank you. So what are your thoughts about the dearth of school libraries, especially in California? One of our questions coming from Aaron Blad Johnson.
Yeah, I think it's alarming. I mean, I think that it is one of the greatest injustices that we've done, not just to librarianship, but to our students and our communities. And we're really lucky in ALA to have, a strong association of school librarians in AASL. And so I really have been grateful to have the opportunity. I thought it was bad in California, right? Like, I thought that we had a difficult time. I live in the Los Angeles area, so we have LAUSD, not that many librarians, but I think I didn't truly understand just how exactly bad it was nationwide. And so when we can find those school districts and those school systems who invest in their school libraries and uplift and show, the results of what it looks like to have a certified school librarian in your classroom, I think that it's really important that we say those messages and that we get that out there. I'm president of all types of libraries and library workers, but I also try to always include school libraries in my messaging as often as I can, especially right now too, because they are at the forefront of intellectual freedom challenges. And it affects their literal jobs right now, with the types of legislation that's coming out. So it's really important for us also who are not in school libraries to support them and advocate on their behalfs and write letters, and within our own school systems to do that work with them.
So at one time, California, I think, was like, 48 or 49 out of 50 states in terms of school librarians. Somebody can correct me on that, but we were not at the top 5, So, we have a wonderful state library. We have a governor that seems to be very pro-education. We got money on the table right now. So if you were sending a message either to Greg Lucas or to Governor Newsom, what would you tell them about school libraries?
Yeah, I would tell them also to call, I believe we have the California School Librarians Association. So to make sure to partner with them, and that the results that we see, I believe the statistic that I heard over the weekend was that a lack of literacy, shucks. I'm going to have to come back to this one later, but it was like 5% of illiteracy affects race also, right? All of these things are tied together. And so we have to ensure that we have folks who are equipped to be able to be partners and give our students the best that they deserve in getting a head start on literacy, whether it's, reading, writing, numbers, whether it's digital literacy, food literacy. There are so many types that school librarian can help. And the school librarian is there, to get the books out, but also to be, our students' advocate, to be our students, to help them with whatever they're going through. They often end up acting as counselors, just like many of us do in academic and public libraries as well, de facto. Right. And so recognizing that the value is so important, and I would love to talk with them more.
It's also very, very challenging for them for the folks who are actually in those positions. I can give you an example of, I won't name names, but people who have spoken up and lost their job because they didn't remove a book from the school libraries, and they stood on the principle, but they're out of a job. I've seen another situation in a library school where the faculty was said, because, and this happened to be in Texas, where they were told they should not be, using any kind of language that talked about gayness, queerness, etc. And, I mean, because people are they're losing their jobs over this stuff. And I'm not, this is a bigger issue than just what Lessa can solve over the next year, right? But I guess my point is that we are set in such a odd situation these days with the kind of divisiveness that's going on in our country. And I don't know what I want to say about that other than it exists, and it's much harder. And certainly we can read our Bill of Rights and all these other kinds of things, but at the same time, the reality is if you get caught in one of those tornadoes, it's really, really hard. And my gosh, you can call ALA, the hotline, and others, but in the end, you're kind of a victim of whatever the circumstances are locally in your situation.
Yeah, and just an aside for folks who may not be aware of it, who may be impacted economically by intellectual freedom challenges, there is the ALA Merit Fund. And that's also a great fund to donate as well if folks have extra means. And so that fund provides direct financial support to folks experiencing hardship due to those types of situations.
Good. Thank you for reminding us about that. So in the remaining few minutes that we have, Lessa, I wondered if there's any kind of words of wisdom that you'd like to give to folks. Our DLCL cohort, the developing leaders in California libraries, many of them are here. They're going through something that similar to what you went through in Eureka. What advice do you have for them about their future? And, what would you say to them?
I would say first, identify your strengths and know what they are so that you can play to them and highlight them, but also recognize your weaknesses and recognize who around you is a complement to those so that you can work together to accomplish the most. I would also, say just be open to the journey. If something excites you and you want to say yes, definitely say yes. Be careful, don't get to that burnout point, but absolutely follow your passion because you can't go wrong there.
Okay. So I haven't really gone into some dark places yet. We won't go there. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you spending this last hour with us. And by the way, I made a joke about dark places. I mean, I recognize that there's some very challenging times and leadership. There's a wonderful side to it. There's also some very challenging sides to exercising leadership. I had the privilege one time in my career to go to Ukraine and visit libraries there and talk about it. And I just can't imagine now, whether it's, at that point in time, I'm going back several years, but, they wanted to understand how libraries function as an important element in our society, as a part of a democratic, society. And they were looking for models. And, here they are now, and who knows, what they're going through. But we're very fortunate. We're fortunate in this country in many, many ways, and sometimes at the expense of others, right? But we're also very fortunate to have people like you, Lessa, who can represent us and be a strong voice for what libraries stand for. So I don't know if there's anything else that you think we should cover that we haven't covered, or if there's any shout outs you want to do. I know you got your colleagues listening. Anything else you'd like to say to us?
I think we have run the gamut today. The last thing that I would just plug is the United Against Book Bans campaign that's going on with ALA right now. Thank you to Aaron for dropping that into the chat. It's a way for us to unite and for us to come together to have the kind of advocacy, that folks who are for book bans have. But we know that we are larger in numbers. And so we just have to show the world that we are.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, Lessa, thank you so much for your time. And I've enjoyed this conversation. I hope our audience has as well. We've had a good turnout today, and we wish you much success in your role. And I want to give a shout out to Patty as well for her leadership over the last year. They say sometimes it's hard to fill shoes from your predecessor, but
it's really hard.
I'm convinced that you'll do a wonderful job. And Patty, thank you for your leadership. And everybody, we'll see you next month. We have Jill Bourne will be joining us from San Jose Public Library. And then our last session for this grant year will be with Greg Lucas in June. That'll be held at the California Library Association conference and in conjunction with that conference. So Lessa, my hat's off to you and good luck. And we'll see you either at CLA or ALA.
See you there. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.